Hi, my name is Kiratze and welcome back to my Escape from Tarkov Handbook. In the last video, we looked at the menus and sort of the navigation of them and sort of what they're all about and what things you'll be doing when you're outside of your raids. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at gearing up for your first raids, as well as sort of the importance of some pieces of gear, and we'll be going to go over all of the different types of gear. We're not going to be going over every single piece of equipment for each sort of gear slot, but I'll go over a brief description and sort of what things you'll be wanting to think about when choosing what type of gear you'd be wanting to use for your very first raids. So when you do your first raids, they are going to be offline raids most likely. I mean, you're very welcome to sort of take your gear into an online raid right off the bat, but it is probably not the most recommended thing. Now, depending on what edition you picked up, on the right side you would have had a bunch of different items. By this point, you probably have went through and examined all of them, as well as organized them to your liking. Now, you'll see a lot of pistols, and pistols are probably going to be the first thing that you'll actually bring into your first raids. They're very, very easy to use, as well as if you do need to purchase new pistols from Prap or Peacekeeper, they are relatively inexpensive. And at the end of the day, as long as you're using proper ammunition, and even if you aren't using proper ammunition, a headshot is a headshot. That means even just going in with a pistol allows you to deal with even some geared players if you're lucky, and at the same time, it provides you with a decent amount of protection from scavs, where you can even just go and headshot a scav, take their stuff, and use it on other geared players. And I do recommend at least going in with a pistol. As long as you're going in with a pistol, I think you'll be good. It's going to be better than going in with nothing. You can go in with nothing, but that's generally frowned upon in the community. It's called hatchling runs or hatchet runs. And that sort of comes from the idea that you're going in with nothing but your melee weapon, which is usually a hatchet, and since your melee weapon cannot be looted off your body if you die, you don't have any worry about losing any gear. So a lot of what some people do will generally go in with just their hatchet or their melee weapon. They'll run to a really high-end loot spawn, and they'll take the loot, like a graphics card or something like that, and then they'll throw it in their secure container. And the secure container in your pouch section is actually a very, very special piece of gear because it doesn't allow it to be looted. When you die, anything in your secure container stays with you, and it goes back to your profile, so you can just transfer it over to your stash. So what that means is hatchlings can run in and get some high-end loot and not have to worry about losing any gear, but I definitely don't recommend doing it. A, it's not a very fun way to play in my opinion, it's very boring. B, you're not going to have any chance at survival against players, as well as even have a pretty much little to no chance against scavs. And C, you're just going to be developing bad habits that won't actually help you learn how to play the game properly. In addition to that, Battlestate is already working on some in-game mechanics and some ways to deter people from actually playing this method. There are already a lot of ways to earn some money in-game. Even if you do happen to lose every single thing in your stash, you do have the ability to play on your scav character, and that is still an easy way to make some profit. And I think there is a fail-safe type of thing, where if you get low enough, you have a low enough amount of value of your stash, I think this game actually sends you a little bit of a care package if you get to that point. So there are still a lot of ways to make money, even if you happen to lose a bunch of your gear. Before I go into some of the mechanics, I'm going to talk a little bit about, and I'm going to paint a little picture for you as to why ammunition is so important. So let's say I was running a raid and I was wearing some of the best armor in the game. In Escape from Tarkov, there's 6 different classes of armor. It goes 1 to 6, and the higher, the better. If I was wearing this armor, for instance, this is a class 6 armor that just makes you super tanky. It's one of the best armors in the game. If I go into a raid and I encounter 2 players, one of them is using this PS round, so they're using the same weapon as I am. This is for this AK-74N, for example. It's a 5.45 by 39 round, and this is a PS round. This is one of the earliest rounds you can that's going to be available to you in the game. And on the other hand, one of the other players that is with him is rolling this 7N39 or a Golnik round, and it's for the same weapon, it's the same caliber, but one is going to be much stronger against me. The person on the left starts shooting me, and they're not going to get through my armor, and they're not going to kill me at all. It's going to take them probably upwards of 20 plus bullets to even break my armor before they can actually start shooting me. Whereas on the other hand, the person on the right side is going to be using this Agolnik round, and they are going to shred through me. This bullet is going to go right through my class 6 armor and kill me pretty much instantly almost. Now, why is that? Well, that's going to be the penetration value of each bullet, and the penetration value is going to be one of the biggest things you want to think about when purchasing a bullet. I am going to link 2 ammo charts in the description below. The first one is going to be a Google Sheet by No Food After Midnight. It's extremely in-depth, and don't worry, you don't have to memorize all the information on there. You're really only paying attention to some of the best bullets you can afford in each caliber section. There's instructions at the top to read it if you're unsure how to read it right off the bat, which is most very likely. It's fairly complicated. And really, you're only trying to pay attention to some of the main value, which is the penetration value of the bullet. Every 10 of that value, you're going to be able to beat that class of armor, and that you can see that also reflected on the right side of each caliber bullet. So with the 2 bullets I was talking about earlier, if you want to find those on the ammo chart, you can sort of follow along. The PS ammo on this left side is going to have a penetration value of 25. So really, this bullet is only effective against class 2 armor or less. Because as long as it hits 20, it beats class 2 armor. If the penetration value was at least 30, it beats class 3 armor. 40 beats class 4 armor, and so on and so forth. And you can also see that on this other ammo. The 7N39 has a penetration value of, I think it's 62. I don't have the guide open right now, so I think it's 62, but it's above 60. So it beats class 6 armor really, really easily. Now, you can also see on the PS ammo that even though it has a penetration value of 25, it goes through class 2 really easily, and it still has a chance of going through class 3 and a very, very low chance of going through class 4. So you're not like 100% stopped, essentially, by higher classes of armor, but obviously the better ammunition that you're using, the better chance that you'll have a go at going up against geared players. And this is really important even if you're using a pistol, because having a better chance at penetrating armor with a pistol means even if you shoot someone in the head and the bullet penetrates, again, a headshot is a headshot no matter what caliber bullet you're using, and it's going to be a one-shot, one-kill. So it's going to give you the best chance at going toe-to-toe against even the most geared players if you can get a lucky headshot on them with a pistol. Now, penetration value is probably going to be the most thing that you're going to focus on. You want your bullet to be able to penetrate any sort of armor. And the other ammo chart I'm going to link is the one by Rune Master, and this one's a lot easier to look at. This one's only going to tell you what the best ammunition you should be using for each caliber, but depending on what stage you are at in the game. So you can, once you want to learn more, you can go into No Food After Midnight's Google Sheet and sort of read and sort of see all the different values of each bullet. But if you're learning, definitely stick to Rune Masters. It's really, really easy. It shows you the best ammunition you should be using for level 1. Level 1 traders, it's going to be showing you the best sort of budget ammo that you can use for each caliber, and then it's going to show you the best ammunition you can use overall for each caliber. Now, just as a side note, penetration value is really important, but there are also other ways you can use bullets and other play styles, essentially. So I'm going to use this rip round as sort of an example. So this rip round, if you look on No Food After Midnight's guide, you can see that it has 2 penetration value. It's not going to go through any sort of piece of armor or cardboard or whatever. But if you look at its flesh damage, this flesh damage is 102. Which means that one shot, no matter where it hits you on the body, it's going to black out that limb or going to kill you if it's unarmored. So, for example, most scabs are going to be unarmored. So one shot to the chest is going to end up killing that person. Headshots are always one shot, but also if you get shot and your thorax gets to 0, you're going to also die. So these are the sort of the 2 lethal spots on the body. So getting shot in the chest with a rip round, if it's unarmored, it's going to instantly kill you. Even getting shot on the limbs is going to instantly black out that limb and make it useless. And the way the health mechanics work in this game is if a limb that's not sort of a lethal spot, if it gets blacked out and it takes further damage, that damage spreads out to the rest of the body at a certain percentage of the damage. And so if I was using this rip round, and this rip round is a 9x19, so it's used pretty commonly in pistols as well as SMGs. So if I have a rapid fire weapon like an SMG, I can, even on like a super geared player, since there's no armor for legs in the game yet, you can actually shoot the legs and block them out. And if you keep shooting that leg, that high flesh damage is just gonna shoot through the rest of the body. And again, even if the thorax and the head get blacked out from damage by taken from other limbs, that is still going to kill you. So you can still kill someone extremely quickly by shooting high flesh damage rounds into a specific limb, over and over again. Now that's going to be just one way to play. Again, you're better off sort of focusing on the penetration value, but again, depending on the weapon that you're using, you can still use different bullets for different situations. This is also important when you're looking over No Food After Midnight's guide, because when you know the penetration value of some of the more common bullets, if you're playing a scav, for example, or if you pick up a weapon off another player and you sort of examine what ammunition they're using, it'll let you know how to play. If you find that, oh, hey, I have some high flesh damage ammunition in this gun, maybe I won't go for body shots. Maybe I'll just go for leg shots or arm shots. Whereas if I come across a body where I find that they're using the 7N39 and Golnick ammo, I'm pretty confident that I can just shoot them in the chest or the head and they're going to die pretty much instantly. So hopefully that helps illustrate how important choosing the right ammunition is, and sort of why it's one of the best things you want to invest your money in, even if you're a new player. So once you're level 5, you can go on the flea market and you can buy some of that ammunition. And even if you spend a decent amount of money on that ammunition, you can just put some in your magazines, and then I just keep it in my gamma container or my secure container. So even if I die, I'll still sort of not have lost everything. I'll only lose the bullets that were in my gun and my magazines. All right, so let's go talk over the gear slots, and we'll go over sort of some of the things that you might equip in those gear slots. We're not gonna go over every single piece of equipment, but we'll talk a little bit briefly about what things you might want to prioritize when you're choosing to go, especially into your first raids. So we'll just go left to right and sort of just go through every single slot a little bit quickly here. The top left is going to be the earpiece. This is going to be housing all of your headphones, and there's a variety of different kinds of headphones you can get in the game. For example, I'm a big fan of the Sordins. There's also one called the Comtax, Tactical Sport, GSZH, or I think it's GSSH, something like that. But there's a bunch of different kinds, and they all have one major purpose, and that's to dampen loud sounds and raise quiet sounds. So namely, dampen the sound of gunshots and raise the volume of things like hearing someone looting in the next room or someone walking nearby. So it allows you to hear much further away. It allows you to hear people much further away than you normally would. Now, it's really, really difficult to get used to these things. When you first loot someone off of a dead body and you put it on, I guarantee you're probably going to like cringe a little bit and wonder what the hell's going on to your sound. It's just normal, especially if you pick up something like the Comtax or the GSSHs. They are some of the more, I guess, lower cost ones and the cheaper ones. In my opinion, they don't sound as good as something like the Sordins or the Tactical Sports, but they all sort of do the same thing in different ways. Like, Sordins aren't as grating on your ears, I find. Comtax are generally quite loud. Tactical Sports sort of almost has its bass boosted a little bit, it seems like. So they all sound different, so it's more about personal preference on what you think sounds the best to you and what you can sort of withstand, I guess. That being said, just headphones in general, you don't have to use them. They are going to give you a big benefit in certain situations, but in other situations, they might actually be a detriment. For example, if you're sprinting through woods, or if you're just running around a lot and playing quite aggressively, you might not actually want to use headphones at all. It does amplify the sound of your own movements, as well as your own looting and everything like that. So if you are running around a lot and sprinting a lot, that sound itself can make it actually tougher to even hear anything around you. So if someone is moving beside you or not. So just bear that in mind. I definitely would try and test them out when you can. So if you do loot them off a dead body, play around with them a little bit, experiment, figure out which brand you are most comfortable with, or if you're even comfortable with them at all. I don't think you should use them right off the bat. I wouldn't recommend using them early on in your Escape from Tarkov journey. It definitely would be good to just learn how to play and learn how to hear things properly without using the headphones. And then when you get more comfortable for certain maps and certain play styles, you can then use the headphones to sort of make those situations even better for you. Underneath the earpiece slot, we have an armband, and armbands are just armbands. There's nothing else to say. They're just a color signifier to let you know who's who when you're playing in a group generally. Not all groups use armbands, but they're just there if you want to use them. There's a bunch of different colors that you can get from Ragman, and they're really cheap. Moving on to the right at the top, we have headwear. So headwear is going to, of course, be any sort of hat or helmet that you can find in the game. You can get things that are cosmetic if you just want a hat, for example. This past the holidays, we got our Christmas Santa hats, which was very, very fun. And on Halloween, we got our pumpkin helmets. But if you're looking for actual armor, This is where your helmets are gonna be slotted into. So there's a variety of different helmets, and the first one that you'll have access to is from Ragman, and it's gonna be dubbed the penis helmet. This is sort of the nickname for this helmet because it looks like a penis head when it's on your head, and so it's a pretty efficient helmet. It's only 17,850 rubles, which for newer players that is gonna seem like a lot, but it is actually quite protective for how much it costs and how early that you can actually get it in the game. Just like body armor, it has different armor classes ranging from 1 to 6. Just like body armor, it has its own materials similar to body armor as well, and it'll also affect your movement, turning speed, and ergonomics. A little bit of a difference though for helmets is if it does cover your ears or not, that's going to make a big difference on how well you can hear in the game. For example, this helmet only has the top of the nape protected, so your ears, your jaw, your face, those are all still hitboxes that can potentially get shot and one-shot you. So a helmet is not going to be a way to just protect yourself from headshots. Additionally, even if you do have a full protective helmet, again, a penetrative round could still somehow get a nice penetrative chance right through the helmet and kill you instantly. So that's still something to think about. Now, if you have one of the higher end helmets that does have full head protection, and you can inspect it and it'll tell you if it actually does protect the ears or not, you will generally not be able to wear headphones with these. There are only a couple of helmets that actually do let you wear headphones with a full protective helmet, such as this Airframe Tan. But even then, this one only lets you actually protect the ears and wear earpieces if you actually buy the proper protective attachment. So as you can see here, if I wore this like it normally was, by default, my ears would not be protected. But slapping these chops on will give me the ability to protect my ears as well as my jaw, and also still have a faceplate and wear headphones. So it's sort of the best of all worlds, plus the penalty for turning speed and stuff like that is quite low. And it also has a very, very high amount of armor points, and a lot of durability means it has more chances to actually protect me from bullets penetrating it. One thing to note as well that's going to be different from body armor is the ricochet chance. So this is also a good thing about the level 1 or the level 3 helmet that you can get from Ragman, the class 3 helmet, is that it does have a high ricochet chance. So it is quite a nice thing to have if you can afford helmets. This is sort of just a good go-to to use because you can wear headphones with it. Plus the ricochet chance means even if someone is using the very, very best ammo in the game that, you know, can defeat class 6 armor no problem, it'll still have just some random chance of being reflected off your helmet and ricocheting off. So a lot about buying a helmet is just depending on how you're going to be playing that specific round. If you're going into factory, for example, and you're not really doing a lot of, you know, sneaking around and stuff like that, and you're going to be planning on playing, you know, pretty aggressively, it might not actually be a bad idea to pick up a helmet that has a faceplate as well as covering your ears and giving you the most protection possible. Whereas sometimes, depending on your playstyle, you may want to go in factory and sort of sneak around a little bit, especially if maybe you're doing a night raid, for example. You might want those ears open so you can actually hear further away. And there's a variety of different helmets. You can see this helmet, for example, has its attachment that gives it an extra armor plate. A lot of these helmets will also come with the ability to mod them so you can put on night vision on them and even thermal vision as well. So just like any tool, a helmet is just a matter of figuring out what situation you're going to be in and sort of preparing accordingly. Now, of course, underneath headwear, we have body armor, and body armor is going to be sort of one of the first protective items you purchase whenever you go out into the raids. Now, there's a ton of different types of body armor, so again, we're not going to be exploring every single one of them, but you can find like extremely high-end armor like this, where it covers your arms and your thorax and stomach. But generally, you're going to have armor that covers your thorax and your stomach. That's sort of the most common protective points. And then you can even find ones like this, which is sort of a more lightweight armor that only protects the thorax, which is the chest in the game. And again, a lot of this is just sort of whatever you are willing to potentially lose is sort of what you want to equip yourself with. Obviously, none of this stuff is going to be a guarantee because as we saw from talking about the ballistics, this round in particular, for example, can go straight through class 6 armor with no problem. So really, you are just sort of hedging your bets, and every sort of increase in protective gear that you put on is just more of an increased chance of survival. And obviously, you just want to sort of figure out how much money you are willing to spend to give yourself the best possible chance to actually escape and survive. Now, there are some things you want to think about in choosing body armor. First of all, You want to make sure that it has decent durability. If you are planning on buying stuff from the flea market and you are buying body armor off there, you want to make sure you're buying armor that actually still has quite a bit of durability left. Durability does become a factor when actually determining if a round penetrates your armor or not. So the lower the durability that an armor gets, the more increased chance that the round will actually go through. So just bear that in mind. Now again, when you first start off playing, you're not going to have access to a lot of armor. So again, if you really want to get access to some of the better armor in the game, you're really just going to have to rush to level 5 so you can access the flea market. When you first get into the game, you're going to just have access to these 2 armors. You're going to have access to the P.A.K.A., which you can buy from Ragman. Oh wait, that is the only one. I guess level 2 you get the new armor they put in, which is this one, which is still class 2, but has a lot more durability. So this is going to be sort of the go-to armor that you're able to buy first off the bat. You can also barter for it, of course, with 3 half masks, and you can even access an armored rig, which is sort of one of the best things that you can get early on in the game. This is definitely a good item to save for getting soap and toilet paper. Now the P.A.K.A. is not going to really protect you from much. It's only class 2, but generally the nice thing is you will probably get it back from insurance because most people will not bother picking up P.A.K.A. armor. But it's still nice to have if you have the money to afford it, because that'll still protect you from some pistol rounds. It'll protect you from buckshot, for example. So a lot of the weapons that scavs generally use, you'll be somewhat protected from. So it will give you a better chance at surviving those fights. Now, continuing on to the right, we have face covers and eyewear. Now, these are pretty much only cosmetic things. There is, I believe, a face cover that's sort of a protective thing as well, but it's not really that great, so I wouldn't worry about it. You're generally going to get your head protection from headwear and obviously body protection from body armor. But eyewear and face cover are pretty much just for cosmetic options. Holster is obviously for your pistol, and then scabbards for your melee weapon. And the melee weapon, you don't really have to worry about losing it because your melee slot cannot be looted when you are dead. On the right side is going to be your sort of containers. On the very top is going to be your tactical rig. This is obviously just going to go over top of your armor, and it's going to give you the ability to carry magazines, consumable items, and pretty much anything that can fit in the slots. And it's pretty much just a wide range of different tactical rigs. And the biggest difference between all of them is mainly just the layout of the rig and how many spots it has open. So for example, this is 10 container size. This is 20, and they have varying loadouts. And this can also be sort of a good thing to think about when you are looting, is what kind of things you can put inside the rig to sort of free up some extra space. So for example, if I'm looting somebody and I'm wearing this MK3 tactical rig, I won't actually have the ability to bring in or to loot off like that head armor. Let's say like my pockets and my backpack were full, for example. It doesn't have a 2x2 slot. So it's pretty much only good for like magazines and 2x1 things and single slot items. Whereas the WT rig, I can actually, if I came across someone with a really good helmet or headphones, I could actually loot that helmet and keep it in the WT rig. So even though this WT rig has a less container size, it has the ability to hold a wider range of items thanks to its 2x2 slot. So there's just a massive amount of different rigs in the game, and they just all have their own different looks and things like that. The biggest difference is when you come across armored rigs, which I did mention before. So that armored rig that you could actually barter for earlier gives you the ability to hold a few amount of items, but the benefit is it actually doubles as armor. So that armor that I mentioned that you could trade for 2 soap and 4 toilet paper from level 1 Ragman, you can actually get this really, really nice level 4 rig. And the class 4 armor is sort of the sweet spot. And I would say if you are planning on getting into some PvP engagements, class 4 is the minimum you want to have. Pretty much anything underneath that, and you're not going to have the greatest chance of even really having a good fight with the opposing players. But class 4 is sort of the minimum for a decent amount of PvP interaction. So armored rigs are a double-edged sword in the sense that, yes, they do double as both armor and a rig in one, but it does make looting a little bit tougher when you're out in the field. Because you aren't able to stack tactical armored rigs with body armor. So if I was someone who had body armor on and I came across this armored rig, I actually would have to choose whether or not I want to keep my body armor, or I want to invest in actually using the tactical rig because it is still technically body armor as well. So it can definitely make looting pretty awkward, and especially if you are wearing the armored rig and you come across some good body armor, it sort of goes the both ways as well. So if I was wearing this tactical rig, for example, and I came across like someone who had this really, really good tactical rig, as well as this really, really good armor, I would definitely have to choose, because I wouldn't be able to equip the body armor until I got rid of the tactical rig. So you would have to sort of do a lot more managing to actually be able to loot a body in this state. So I would have to open up the rig, transfer all my stuff over to the new rig, and then dump my old rig, and yada yada yada. And it's just it's a lot less efficient than if you were just dealing with, you know, the regular thing, which is usually you're just ditching your tactical rig or just ditching your body armor and swapping it out for the other person's. Now, this can also be for your benefit. If you are going in with a tactical rig, the one nice thing about these is because it's so awkward to actually loot, generally people will actually not bother looting it. They'll usually just leave it. Obviously, if someone doesn't have armor, they're probably going to take it, but a lot of geared players will generally not want to have to either ditch their rig or ditch their good body armor, so they'll usually just leave it so you can get it back in insurance. That being said, for this lower level armored rig, for example, one thing we didn't really talk about too much is the material. Ceramic is probably one of the worst materials in the game in terms of how well it actually repairs. So if your ceramic armor does get down to 0, you're generally just better off maybe repairing it a little bit and selling it right away, and then just buying a completely new one, just because the repair cost is so expensive for ceramic items. And underneath that, you have your pocket slots. These aren't obviously going to be anything that you equip anything on into to sort of increase your pocket size or anything of that nature, but they're mainly just going to be used for your consumable single slot items like grenades or medical items. One thing especially about your grenades, if you want to use grenades for putting into your rig or your pockets, those are the two places they need to be before you can actually pull them out with the hotkey G. If you have grenades in your secure container or your backpack, that won't work, so just make sure you keep that in mind. Additionally, if you want to know what the order that your grenades will be released in when you hit G, you just have to follow how the grenades go in when you hold Control T. So if I do this, you can see what slots the grenades go into. It always goes from left to right in your pockets, and then top left to bottom left. Top left to bottom right, sorry, in your tactical rig when you're putting things in your from your inventory for grenades. So that's going to be the order that they get thrown in. So you can sort of use that when you are, if you are sort of loading up with a mix of flashbangs and explosive grenades, you can sort of put them in the proper order so you're not accidentally throwing a explosive grenade when you meant to do a flash, and vice versa. Additionally, one thing to remember when you're actually applying anything that you want to use with a hotkey, you're going to want to keep it in your rig or your pockets. Again, anything in your backpack or your container won't actually work. So if you want to use medical items or pockets, all you have to do is put them into the appropriate slot, hover over them, and use whatever number you want to apply the hotkey to. So I generally will have painkillers on 4, for example. I'll have my medical item on 5, and then any other extra medical items I can put on 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0. You can also put on grenades if you do want to select grenades, for specific uses rather than just using the order system. Additionally, when you do select the grenades when you're in game, it'll actually hold the grenade in hand, and you can actually do an alternate throw where it's sort of a underhand toss rather than a big overhand throw. So you don't want to sort of maximize your distance. You just want to toss it quickly down the stairs or something like that. And underneath your pockets is going to be a backpack. So backpacks, again, there's not much to say there. It's sort of similar to rigs. It's just there's just a wide range of backpacks. I have a few of them here. One thing that for looting efficiency is you can stack backpacks inside of backpacks, inside of backpacks, inside of backpacks, inside of backpacks, and so on and so forth in an infinite amount. I have no idea if they're going to change that or not. But that is also a good tip for the stash, is you can actually use your tactical rigs and your backpacks as extra storage space to save a lot more space and to hoard a lot more loot. So a lot of these big tactical rigs, for example, have a ton of slots. So this BlackRock rig is only a 3x4, but it has a total of 20 slots in it. So you could store a bunch of like medical items or things like that in your tactical rigs, and then just sort of keep an eye on them, and you'll just have to remember which rig is holding what item. So just bear that in mind. But it's a nice way to sort of get extra storage space without having to break the bank, essentially, by buying cases. And then last but not least is the pouch slot, and that's going to hold your secure container, which you're never ever really going to remove this item unless you are upgrading into a larger secure container. I have the Edge of Darkness edition, which is the highest edition, so I have the largest secure container, which is called the Gamma. When you first start out, if you have a standard edition, you're probably going to end up with the Alpha container, and there are in-game tasks and in-game ways to actually increase your pouch size as well, so don't worry about that. And if you are super hardcore and you complete every single task in the game, you are rewarded with a container that's even larger than the Gamma container called the Kappa container. And again, like I mentioned before, this is your secure container that's never ever going to be looted. If you die, anything in your secure container comes back with you, so you can sort of just empty it out into the stash. And if you find some like smaller, really valuable items like bitcoins or graphics cards, those are generally the items that you'll throw into your pouch slot, so you can make sure they're safe and secure. So even if you do die, you're only losing whatever other gear you have equipped on you. So this will be generally where you hold all of your more expensive ammo, your expensive keys, anything that you just deem is, worth saving, and anything that you really just don't want to lose when you die. So like rare medical items and things like that are also generally held in here. You can also find smaller containers that can fit in this secure container. For example, this documentations case, as well as there's one called a key tool, which is only a 1 slot that also holds keys. And then you'll also see streamers with other ones that called like sick cases, for example, which can hold an even more variety of items such as money and keys and dog tags and everything of that nature. So you'll just have to keep your eye out and sort of learn what kind of things can go in here to sort of increase your secure container size a little bit. One thing is you can't put any weaponry in the secure container, so no pistols or no small SMGs or anything like that. And you also cannot put high-end thermal scopes into the container as well. So last but not least, we're going to be talking about our medical items. And medical items are you're always going to want to bring in some sort of medical item into your raids. Again, these are just the thing that's going to prevent you from dying in the middle of a raid, so they're very, very useful. I've sort of organized them from top to bottom in terms of the progression on sort of their value. At the very top, you have your level 1 stuff. And this is going to be you probably will have started with a bunch of these in your profile already from whatever edition you bought. So the AI2 is going to be your main medical healing item. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to, whenever a medical item says removes radiation exposure or removes toxication, you can ignore that because those two mechanics aren't actually in the game yet. This has a use time of 2, and it has HP resources of 100. And certain medical items have different levels of max healing. I believe the AI2, I think, is 50. So for example, if my left arm was completely not completely blacked out, but if it was at like 1 health, for example, because you can't actually heal blackened limbs, if it was at 1 health, it would only heal up to 51, and then I'd have to use another sort of use to get it to max level. If you do apply it to a hotkey, I think it does prioritize sort of the most damaged limb that you have, but you can also heal by just dragging on top of the limb, and that can be important because let's say your thorax or your head is closer to dying, but your left arm still has lower health. It might prioritize your arm if you use the hotkey over your thorax or your head, but these are actually sort of more important to heal over your arm or your legs, for example. And then you have a few items that will sort of cover the sort of 3 main effects that you'll come across when you get injured in Escape from Tarkov. You have a splint, which removes fractures. You have bandages, which removes blood loss and stops bleeding. And you have painkillers, which removes the pain effect, which will essentially, depending on where you are getting the pain, for example, on your arm, if you have pain, you're going to be shaking a lot, and it's going to be really, really difficult to ADS. You're also going to have like some difficulty seeing. It's going to get a little bit blurry. So painkillers are really useful. Additionally, they will also help you bypass some very major negative effects, such as blackened limbs or blackened legs or broken legs. So normally when you get a fracture on your leg or your leg becomes blackened out, you will start limping and you won't be able to sprint, you won't be able to jump, and it'll just, you're going to be completely immobile, essentially. There's nothing worse than getting a blackened leg or a broken leg early on and you don't have a splint or anything, and you'll just have to limp all the way to the extract. It just takes forever. You're super exposed. It's terrible. Painkillers will allow you to ignore that for a certain amount of time. Now, that being said, you still want to be careful, especially on blackened legs. If you do decide to use painkillers and start moving you can start moving at a normal pace, but if you decide to sprint or jump, you will still take damage to other parts of your limbs. It's a very small amount of damage per step, but it's still something to consider when you are sprinting a long distance, for example, on painkillers without healing your legs. Now, if you do decide to get some like white tape, for example, you can still make some early barters with like Therapist, for example, for some better medical items like this car med kit. Now, once you get better medical items, they'll have multiple uses. So this one, not only does it heal you like an AI2, it heals you normally like an AI2, it has more durability, plus it actually stops blood loss. So it's sort of like a bandage and an AI2 combined into one, which is really, really nice. When you see the stops blood loss effect and has 40 HP, that means that's how much durability and HP is lost out of the item to actually use that effect. So if you do heal a bloody limb, for example, it's not only going to deplete the health that you heal that limb for, it's going to deplete an extra 40 on top of that to stop the blood loss. And then from there, you essentially just get better versions of your starting items. So the car med kit is a better item, better version of the AI2 and the bandage. The Salowa is just a better car med kit. It has more durability. It uses less health. It uses less of the durability to heal blood loss. And then you even get like better splints and stuff like that. So there's just a wide range of medical items you can go through and you can sort of examine to see what best benefits you sort of for what specific slot and what you can afford to sort of keep on your rig and your pockets to hotkey and lose potentially. But usually you'll keep your sort of more rare and expensive medical items in your gamma container because you'll only really need to use those for certain points. Now, one thing to keep in mind is sort of the use time, because in a firefight, you're not going to have a lot of time to heal depending on sort of what situation you're in. So, for example, the Golden Star, the ibuprofen, and the Vaseline, they all sort of do one of the same major effects in being able to remove pain. They're sort of just a painkiller of sorts. The Golden Star Bomb's the best one in terms of what it can do because it can also remove contusions. It sort of has the most time that it sort of has the most amount of time that it removes pain for, and it can even do stuff like have a little bit of energy and hydration recovery, whereas something like the Vaseline doesn't do all that stuff, and it even has like less pain removal. But on the other hand, the Golden Star Bomb is 7 seconds, so it's a very, very long use. So in a firefight, 7 seconds is really long time. It's the difference between someone just being able to sprint at you and sort of charge you while you're trying to use your medical item. So I sort of get in the habit of using always having the analgin painkillers on my hotbar. So in a firefight, considering these are only 3 seconds use, even though it's only 170 seconds of pain removal, you're not really going to need a lot of time in a firefight. Firefights don't last like minutes and minutes and minutes. So you being able to just pop behind cover, pop a painkiller, it's really, really easy to sort of keep going and keep fighting. And then when I'm done the firefight, if I have like blackened legs or something like that, and maybe I'm out of my surgical kit, I can pop a Golden Star to make sure that I have the longer lasting pain removal so I can keep moving on my broken legs and not be caught out. Because once the pain wears off, you're going to go back to limping, and you want to make sure that you don't have that happen when you're like in the middle of an open area, for example. The IFAK is just a different version of the Salowa. It's sort of it's this one's sort of personal preference. The nice thing about IFAK obviously is it only takes up a single slot, but it has less durability overall. So that's why I sort of like the Salowa over the IFAK. Usually I'm running with large enough rigs that the 2 slots it takes up is not that big of a deal. And I'd rather have the extra healing durability. But I always keep an IFAK in my gamma container because it's a very, very small slot. But it's still a really, really good healing item to use if my Salowa runs out. And then last but not least, you have the Grizzly, which depending on the edition you get, you might have started with one of these. This is just a massive, massive healing item. You can see that it removes fractures, blood loss, contusion, and it only takes 5 seconds, and it has 1800 durability. It's just a insane amount of healing. This is not exactly a practical item to take into battle, though. You'll generally not take this into your raids, but what I'll usually use it for is just to keep to the side. When you do die in a raid or when you get injured in a raid, you do have to heal out of your raid. And because of the really, really large health pool, it's just I could just quickly right-click it, do heal all, and heal all my limbs and get ready for the next fight, rather than having to, like, let's say, buy a bunch of AI2s or a bunch of Salowas and heal, and take up more space through that. So that's generally how you're going to use the Grizzlies for. You're very much not going to bring this into battle with you. It's just not efficient. And the very last medical item you'll consider is the surgical kits. So there's the CMS and there's the Serv 12. The CMS is going to take up less slots than the Serv 12, but it's not going to remove fractures. And the surgical kits are extremely useful tools. They will allow you to heal blackened limbs. So you can see it's a very, very long use time. So again, it's not it's one of those items that you're going to be using after the fight, but you're going to be able to recover blackened limbs. Now, that being said, the CMS, they both reduce your maximum health of the limb by a certain percentage. So the CMS kit's going to reduce it by more than the Serve 12. So you're gonna have to decide on whether or not like that's worth it for you. Serve 12 is really nice. It does take up an extra slot, but the fact that it removes fractures at the same time, as well as it has much more durability, is a lot better in my opinion than sort of the 5 use that you get out of the CMS. Even though that the Serve 12 does take, you know, an extra slot and it does take 4 more seconds to use. But it also reduces your max health of the limb by a less amount than the CMS does. So you're going to be able to get more out of that limb in future uses. Every time that limb gets blackened out and you heal it with a CMS, it's still going to get lowered by a percentage. So just bear that in mind. But it's always better than having, you know, a blackened limb. A blackened limb is just the worst because it increases your chance of dying and it just makes you less efficient in fights. So with whatever item you go with, these are generally the items you're going to have in your secure container, because again, you're really only using them for specific times and they aren't exactly the cheapest items. But once you start making some money, they're a very, very good investment. I think when you get the flea market, I think you can get a CMS for like 30-some thousand, so it's a decent amount, but you get a lot of uses out of it, so it's very much worth it. And you also may have come across injectors, and injectors are just drugs. There's just a wide range of drugs. Morphine can actually be slotted into here because it can sort of go along with these other medical items because it is just sort of one of the painkiller items in the game. It takes the least amount of time to use, so it's very, very quick to use in battle. And it also removes contusion, and it removes pain for a longer time than the painkillers. So it's just a very, very good in-battle use. It's just very, very quick and very, very efficient. But obviously, it's quite expensive, and early on, you'll want to make sure to save the morphines anyways, because you can use those for tasks in the future. And you also have a variety of different other injectors. So you can see there's like adrenaline, there's this one called a regenerative stimulant injector, Propital, SJ1 from TG Lab, SJ6 from TG Lab, and they all have just a wide range of effects. So you can go to the flea market and you can search some of these things if you want to examine sort of what they do and sort of what things you might want to use the most. I think Propital is probably one of the best ones to use because it has a really, really good effect of health regeneration. So in a fight, if you start getting shot at, you can just sort of pop this. It removes pain, it removes contusions, it boosts some of your skills, and it also starts healing you over time. And it's just such a really good drug. But one thing to keep in mind with these drugs is they will always come with a penalty. So morphine obviously doesn't come with that much of a penalty. It's just sort of 10 reduction in hydration. But things like these experimental stuff will sort of, this one, for example, lowers your energy and hydration recovery. This one gives you the tunnel effect. It gives you pain afterwards, and it gives you hand tremors afterwards. So these are sort of the things you have to sort of watch out for. They're sort of just combat stimulants, essentially. So those are something to keep in mind for those. And these are also items you'll usually just sort of, unless you have a lot of them, you can sort of keep in your gamma container, so you can just sort of duck behind cover, pop one of these combat stimulants, and sort of keep fighting. But yeah, those are sort of the major things you're going to be thinking about and the major items that you're going to be purchasing when you're going into your future raids. There are some other things that you can consider, like if you want to bring food and water. That's sort of the last thing that you'll think about. For longer raids, if I'm going on Shoreline or Interchange and I'm planning to stay in that map for quite a long time, bringing water and bringing some sort of hydration and energy recovery is really, really good, especially since if you get something like a blackened stomach early on, that puts you in a really, really bad state, because if you get a blackened stomach in this game, your hydration and your energy, they plummet. They get to 0 really, really quickly. And you want to be careful about that, because if you get to 0 hydration, you're going to start getting damage over time, and you're going to have other poor effects like your vision starts to go. And then if you get 0 energy, you just have a chance of dying. So those are big things to worry about if you do happen to get a blackened stomach early on. So bringing in some sort of some preparation with hydration and energy is a nice thing to sort of combat that if you happen to get into an early firefight and your stomach gets blacked out and you don't have a surgical kit. Now, one of the very last things you might consider bringing into your raid once you start bringing in more gear is to bring some something to drink and something to eat for longer raids. So when you're in a longer raid, your hydration and your energy levels are going to start dropping, and you don't want those to get to zero. If your hydration levels get to zero, you're going to start getting dehydrated, and you're going to start taking damage over time. Additionally, you're going to have other effects like your vision starts getting a little bit tougher to see. And if your energy gets to zero, you're going to have a chance of dying and just sort of keeling over. So it's very, very important to not hit zero in either of those. Obviously, if you do have to choose, try and find food over having something to drink. And there are a variety of different items. There are certain items that can even give you both. For example, milk gives you hydration and energy levels. So that's always nice to have. And so if I go into Interchange or one of the larger maps and I plan on staying there for a very long time, I'm definitely going to want to bring in something to drink and something to eat, because I personally don't like trying to look for that stuff in the middle of a raid. It's nice to be able to get a bunch of loot and then just eat and drink and then just start heading towards the extract rather than having to try to search for the food and water. But that's perfectly up to you. Again, it's one of those optional things. You don't really have to bring that stuff in, but if you have the money, it doesn't hurt to just bring that stuff in to sort of prepare for a longer raid. Additionally, I get into the habit of bringing these in because if I do get into an early firefight and my stomach gets blacked out, once your stomach gets blacked out, your hydration levels and your energy levels just plummet. They drop extremely quickly, and it just makes it that much tougher to actually survive in the middle of the raid. And if you don't have a surgical kit, you're going to actually not be able to survive very long unless you're just are very, very lucky in being able to find something to drink and something to eat, to sort of keep those levels up until you get to the extraction. Additionally, one thing I forgot to mention about the surgical kits is they only heal your arms, your legs, and your stomach. If you get your thorax and your head blacked out, it doesn't matter. You're going to die. The only caveat to that is if you're bleeding, that does actually give you the ability to bleed out in your thorax and your head and hit zero without actually dying. That being said, you aren't able to use a surgical kit on those areas, so any instance of damage after you bleed out to zero in your head and your thorax, that's when you're going to die. But that's going to do it for this video. This one was quite a long one, but we had a lot of information to cover, and hopefully you learned this, and hopefully it made you better prepared on bringing certain items into your raids. Again, your earlier raids are probably only going to consist of bringing a pistol in, maybe a couple of mags, maybe a pack if you want to go in to protect from your scavs. And some medical items as well on your hotbar, as well as your pouch. You can also go and buy something like a scav vest for some early rigs. And you can, again, if you're level 5, you can also go to the flea market to buy some better medical items, such as Salawas, if you so choose. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching. In the next video, we're probably going to jump into a raid, and we'll start going over sort of the basic and advanced movements of the game, sort of talk about the gun mechanics, sort of talk about what your actual goal in Escape from Tarkov is. And we're going to sort of play through an offline raid, and we'll talk about sort of what things you'll want to start learning when you are playing your first raids in the game. So thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.